everybody? Ty here. Hope everyone's doing well. In case you missed it, we had a heck of a live stream last night. We did live coverage for the most recent winter storm, which had a crazy episode of what we would call thunder ice, I guess, at this point. I would almost even go as far as to call it an ice MCS because of the fact that we had so much lightning and incredible precipitation totals to go along with it. I guess you would say freezing rainfall. I don't know at this point. It's just not something that you see very often. It was quite amazing to watch, to be honest. We had probably up to maybe even 50 to 100 reports of lightning before all was said and done. Maybe even more than that. Don't have a final tally, but I could at least remember seeing at least close to 50 in the live stream alone. But in any case, though, also that same storm system, ironically enough, caused a couple of tornadoes over here towards Kentucky. There's still a marginal risk, or actually slight risk, excuse me, at the time of this video. It's a slight risk for severe weather over here towards parts of northern Tennessee and southern Kentucky as well right now. But what if I told you that we have the chance of potentially running that back again with yet another system that's out here towards the west right now? As you see me going through this progression right here, what you'll notice is the probabilities start to increase more as we go off to the east here as we get into the weekend. Not the best timing considering the fact that Super Bowl Sunday is coming up and a lot of people are going to be going out and getting ready to watch the game at either their friends or loved ones' houses. So especially if you're over towards the northeast, because I know Philly's in the game, definitely need to be careful of the weather, especially given the fact that we're expecting a lot in the way of frozen precipitation over here. Whether it's going to be ice or snow depends on your area at this point in time here. But there's a very strong signal in either case for significant snow of maybe up to 4 inches or more possible over towards the northeast, especially towards southern New England. And then, of course, over here towards the mid-Atlantic here, ice seems to be the greatest concern there, especially over towards Virginia's parts of southern and southwestern Pennsylvania, and then also even into Maryland at this point. Now, here's a look at the storm system from the perspective of the jet stream at this juncture. So here is our storm system coming in from the west. This is not a storm system here. It's just going to be a trough and some cold air coming in. And you would think that this is going to play a part, and it will in a way, but this is going to end up becoming irrelevant because as we go further along, we have to watch for a sneaky little low pressure that pops up over here towards the Tennessee and Ohio valleys. It's going to cause a little bit of wedging here, so towards the lower to mid levels of the atmosphere here. We're going to deal with some warming, and this is how the freezing rain threat ends up coming to be. So after a while, that cold air kind of rushes its way back in. Moisture gets pushed out this way. But with that low also deepening, which you'll see in a second here, this is what's going to cause those increased snowfall chances over here towards the New England region as a whole here. So if we were to go ahead and look at those surface temperatures, you'll get a better reflection of what I'm talking about here. So here's our storm system out towards the west right now. You see the cold air rushing in behind it to go with it. This is us getting into Friday night into Saturday. Here's that cold air wrapping around the backside of that. The storm system is actually right about here at this point. By the time we get into Saturday evening, look at this right here. Even though this is in this position here is where we're expecting the greatest chance for frozen precipitation, look towards the West Virginia mountains over here. Not far away from that same area where we were talking about the greatest chance of ice accretion, you can see that in the mountains we're dealing with temperatures up into the 40s and 50s. This is going to be due in part to a low, like I said before, that builds up over here. It's going to drag that warm air just a little bit further off to the north here. And it's going to be a shallow area as well, and a pretty significant one at that. And this is where that ice threat really comes into play here. What the hope would be, and I'm really hoping that this does occur, is that we end up getting enough warm air to where we would mostly be dealing with rain. But the problem is with these surface temperatures, we're going to see a lot of this rain that would fall to the ground freeze on contact here, especially with the cold air that's already in play with this as well. So those ground temperatures are going to be just as important as those temperatures that are at the mid levels here. We're going to go ahead and take a look at those lower to mid level temperatures as well. And this is where things kind of get a little bit more complex here. So we're going to go ahead and jump forward all the way up into Saturday morning. You can see that we're well below zero on the Celsius scale here, so we're below freezing at this point. So basically 0 degrees Celsius, to those of you that don't know, would be 32 degrees Fahrenheit. So we get into the early afternoon, look what's happening over here towards southern parts of Pennsylvania here. We're about 1 or 2 degrees Celsius, so we're just above freezing at the lower levels of the atmosphere. This is about 1,000 feet above our heads that we're looking at right now. So we'll see some of that cold air kind of rush back in here and there. Then by the time we get into the evening hours, this is a very similar look to what we had with the storm system yesterday. We're about 4 to 6 degrees Celsius here. I think with the convection here, we could also see a potential for more thunder ice, maybe even thunder snow could be possible a little bit further off towards the east. But I really think that towards the deformation zone, which is going to be right around this region, is where we're going to see the greatest probability of convection here. We'll take a look at that a little bit later. But as you can see, that wedging comes into play, and that's where I think the greatest concern for freezing rain is going to occur across this corridor here. And then if we look higher up in the atmosphere, it's a very similar look. We'll just kind of fast forward all the way up towards Saturday morning. You can see a very similar thing occur. And this is a little bit higher up in the atmosphere. This is about 10 to 20,000 feet up. And as you can see, not quite as prominent. It's a little bit colder at this level, but even so, threat for freezing rain is a little bit more palpable at this point. Good area to click on a sounding here. You'll see a good example of that. Would be right over here towards the Virginia borders here, and maybe even over towards parts of Maryland as well. You can see at the surface here, this red area here, this is showing temperature of 30 degrees Fahrenheit and dew points at 29 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, when you see this big jump off to the right like this, that's showing that temperatures are going to be above freezing at this point here. The 0 degrees Celsius line is right here, so anything off to the right is surpassing that. And it gets quite warm towards this level of the atmosphere as well, which is really insane to think about. So like I said, I do think some convection could come into play. It's a little bit more questionable with this one. The last setup was did a little bit better with that. But in any case though, you can see that eventually over time we do start to cool down. If this pushed a little bit off to the left in the higher levels of the atmosphere, I do think that we could get more in the way of, let's say, thunder snow or thunder ice in this case. But in either way, no matter how you look at it here, we don't go back to freezing here until we get well up into the atmosphere. So with this, we're more than likely going to be seeing rain almost all the way up until it gets to the ground, and then it freezes on contact. Some sleet could be mixed in with this, but again, SQT kind of tells the story here. Most best guess of precipitation type is freezing rain at this juncture. So let's go ahead and move on to the next thing here, and we'll actually go ahead and take a look at the timing of which this precipitation is going to occur here. So as we mentioned before, we're watching the last of this system that we were just tracking come out here. We're still going to be dealing with some lake effect snow here and there, especially if you're over towards Erie and other various areas, Buffalo. You're going to get a little bit more snow ahead of time. Then as we go further along here, especially as we get into Saturday afternoon, we'll start to see some precipitation come in. Really won't start to pick up until much later in the evening. This is where that ice accretion really may start to come into play as we get into late Saturday evening. And then as we go further along, we'll see that precipitation outrun the cold here. And then eventually we'll start to see an increase in snowfall totals over here towards pretty much all of New York here and most of New England by the time we get into Sunday morning. So again, one last thing that we'll look at here, and like I said, I'm kind of thinking we won't see as great a potential for thunder ice due to the fact that we won't have as much in the way of convection. But then again, the amount of available energy always is a key factor in all of this. But from what I can see here, don't really have a whole lot to work with. Kind of what I was thinking this time after looking at that SQT, but I wouldn't rule out the potential for maybe 1 or 2 rumbles of thunder here. We'll have to see how things ultimately pan out with this. If more cold air rushes in, we might be in business there. So last things that we're going to look at here is ice potential and of course snowfall potential. It's really over here towards parts of, I would say, south central Pennsylvania where the ice accretion may be the highest, or maybe a little pocket over here towards Ohio. Really, it was towards Ohio with the last system where we had some of the greatest threat of thunder ice, and also probably some increased ice accretion from that as well. The reason why thunder ice is such a big deal is because of the fact that whenever you have thunder, more often than not, you will end up having heightened precipitation rates. That goes with any type of precipitation, whether it's thunder, whether it's what thunder, whether it's rain, sleet, snow. Usually with frozen precipitation, you can get up to about an inch an hour or more. Sometimes with a traditional thunderstorm, you can have rates that are even higher than that. But if you go across the board here, we're doing a model comparison here, looking at other models, and I mean, the totals are pretty aggressive here in comparison to what the National Weather Service blend of models is. But the key factor is a lot of them are showing a very similar bullseye. There are some wild cards here, however, and it's very much conditional, especially as we get over towards the southeastern parts of the state here in Pennsylvania. Another area that we need to make sure that we mention, of course, is over towards Maryland. We need to be watchful of DC, Baltimore as well before all is said and done here. Blend of models isn't really showing as much for the region, but some ice accretion is indeed possible. So regardless of whether you're expecting 1/10 of an inch ice or 0.02 inches, be watchful of the roadways for black ice. Winter weather advisories will most likely be issued probably tomorrow, I would say, at this point. So the other thing to talk about, of course, is going to be the snowfall. Snowfall is actually going to be very impressive again, like I mentioned before, over towards parts of New England here, heading into New York as well. That lake effect snow is going to help bolster those totals over towards Buffalo and over towards Erie and other areas. But once we get further towards the coast here, as this low continues to deepen, we actually could expect totals maybe of 6 to 8 inches in some spots here. And normally you would expect these to be more prominent in the mountains. Not quite the case here. Pretty interesting to see that. Then of course, as we look back over towards Midwest here, it's a nice little streak here of 6 to 8 inches possible across parts of Wisconsin here, heading towards Lake Michigan, then over even towards parts of Minnesota, towards Minneapolis. We could get some pretty good action there as well. And then we do our model comparison here. Pretty good agreement across the board. Some models are a little bit more aggressive than others, but for the most part, I see a fair amount of model agreement over the course of the next 84 hours in regards to what to expect. Obviously, this whole weather pattern that we're going to be dealing with over the course of the next couple of weeks is going to bring a lot of winter weather, may bring some severe weather as well, depending on where you are. If you end up in the warm sector, there's a shot of that. But in any case, though, that's all I got for you on this video with winter weather. We'll see you guys in the next one, hopefully. But until then, take care and have an awesome rest of your Thursday.